Welcome to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome into the big show, Soccer Morning, here on WorldSoccerTalk.com. I hope you are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on a Thursday. What is it, April 16th? I hope your tax day went well. We didn't talk about tax day yesterday. That's one of those old radio bits. Hey, everybody, it's tax day. You get your taxes in yesterday. Hope you got a big refund. Use your refund to buy us a mug and a t-shirt for Soccer Morning. That's what you should do, right? That's where we should push people, Trevor. Please go to backheel.com/store, buy a mug. Hope your tax day was good. I hope you enjoyed USA-Mexico, unless you're a Mexico fan, of course, and then you didn't. 2-0 once again for the U.S. We'll get into all of that today. That's going to be top of mind for a lot of you Americans out there. I'm sure we can get into what it means, what it doesn't mean. Seth Vertelny of Goal.com will join us. I'm sure somebody at Goal did player ratings, and I don't blame them, and that's their job. It gets people interested. People love player ratings. Sort of like power rankings. Player ratings, power rankings. Say that 4 times fast. I'm sure they did some. I don't think they mean a whole lot. Obviously, Jordan Morris scores. Agadello scores. Michael Bradley was, Was he good? Was he bad? Who knows? That field was so terrible. I'm sorry. This is for later. Also on today's show, Ross Dunbar will join us to talk German developments. Jurgen Klopp will get into that and his decision to leave Borussia Dortmund at the end of the season, what his next challenge will be, the legacy he leaves behind at Dortmund. And then we'll also talk about Bayern Munich falling in the Champions League yesterday. And that's in our headlines. I will start with USA 2, Mexico 0 in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome, 65,000 people in attendance. Many of them having a wonderful, lovely time. It seemed to be a very mixed crowd. Obviously, when I say that, I mean there were a lot of more Mexico fans than U.S. fans, but maybe more U.S. fans than people expected. And then of course, we do have that unique dynamic in this country where there are people who can root for both teams based on their heritage, based on where they live, where they're from, who their parents are. And who knows, which way they were leaning. Interesting discussions happening on Twitter about, the impact that guys like William Yarborough and Alvarado and Garza have on those people, on those fans. I don't know how you go about selecting your team. I don't really have a choice. I'm a U.S. men's national team fan. I don't think I would ever wear a half and half jersey, but I can kind of understand the mindset that leads you to do so. Jordan Morris, the first college player to score a goal for the U.S. men's national team since 1991. Dante Washington scored that goal while he was still in college. Clearly a much different time in American soccer in the history of the U.S. men's national team. And to have a college player, and look, well-taken goal. Bit of a fortuitous deflection for Jordan Morris. He was the Energizer Bunny out there. He looks like a fullback to me, running down the field. I don't know that I have a soccer comparison in terms of his playing style, but he's just got this powerful thing about him. Maybe there's some Wayne Rooney in it, maybe a little bit. Obviously not. I'm not putting him on that kind of skill, but just in the way he carries himself and the manner in which he runs. So big debut goal. It wasn't a debut, excuse me. Big first ever goal for Jordan Morris. And is he going to be pushed to sign that deal with the Sounders and become a professional sooner rather than later based on this experience? I don't know. Interesting note, he could not be named man of the match last night because the man of the match is sponsored by Budweiser, and being 20 years old, Jordan Morris is too young to be sponsored by Budweiser. Fun stuff. Juan Agadello with a very nice goal. His first in 4 years for the national team. Took a nice pass from Michael Bradley out of the air, cut inside. A bunch of Mexican players fell down, and he put away a goal. Good stuff for him. He was clearly emotional. The overriding story yesterday was the field conditions down in San Antonio. You lay down that sod, that temporary surface in an indoor venue, and it was bad. There were some bounces that just made no sense. It looked ridiculous. It looked like an injury waiting to happen. Obviously, Kyle Beckerman did come off injured for the U.S. I don't have a report on him today. U.S. Soccer said it was a thigh contusion, except it looked non-contact, and he later had an ice pack on his knee. So we don't exactly know what happened with Kyle Beckerman. RSL fans are clearly sweating bullets today. We'll find out later, I'm sure. The question we'll get into with Seth Vertelny is whether or not you can take anything away from this game. It's good to get a win for the United States. It's a conference booster. They didn't give a late goal. They didn't fall after going ahead. They played relatively strong. In fact, the second half was likely better than the first half for the United States. So you can build on those things. But in terms of what it means for analyzing the player pool or looking forward into the future, I don't know if there's a whole lot there. In the Champions League yesterday, Barcelona took apart PSG 3-1 in Paris. Luis Suarez nutmegging David Luiz twice. Not once, but twice. That second one especially. Not only did he nutmeg Luiz, that's just poor defending on the Brazilians' part, but not only did he nutmeg Ruiz, but that finish, that curler to the top corner, just absolutely beautiful from Luis Suarez. So Barcelona with a massive, massive lead as they go back to the Camp Nou to attempt to finish that tie out and go into the semifinals. Porto, meanwhile, as I mentioned, taking down Bayern Munich 3-1. Just mistakes all over the field for Bayern Munich. Dante with an egregious one that led to, I believe that was a Quaresma goal. But both Quaresma and Jackson Martinez starring for Porto, the Portuguese side. Who now, look, the question is for Pep Guardiola and Bayern Munich is whether they can turn that around. We'll get into that question later on with Russ Dunbar as well. I'm sure Guardiola is going to project an image of confidence. Yes, of course we can do this at home at the Allianz. This is not a problem for us. And you would actually, maybe favor them to do so. But Porto has given them a shot here. That one goal that they gave up may be the difference in the end. I mentioned this yesterday. I'm just going to quickly hit it here because I think it bears mentioning. You guys know how I feel about Sepp Blatter. I'm sure you feel much the same way as I do. He's likely to get another presidential term when those elections come up next month. But there is now a report out from the Sunday Times in London that Sepp Blatter essentially went to the Qataris and said, hey, you've got this World Cup, which you may or may not have bought, and I will avoid investigating you, or I will keep FIFA from investigating this bid and whether or not it was obtained through nefarious means, if you will oust Mohammed bin Hammam, who at the time was Sepp Blatter's biggest competition for the presidency of FIFA. Now, this is not a surprise to anybody. It does give me the opportunity to do this. A little Blatter drop. It's been a little while. I'm sure it'll make some people happy. It's not a surprise, but it's just another brick in that wall that is just how duplicitous and disgusting Sepp Blatter is as the leader of football in this world. I don't. There doesn't seem to be a way out of this. He's got such a strong political base that we may have to wait until the man retires. And FIFA is already so corrupt and so disgusting from the fan level that they may never recoup their reputation, and yet we have to live with them. It's very difficult times. Let's take a break. When we come back, Seth Vertelny from goal. We'll break down USA-Mexico, talk about Jordan Morris, Juan Agudelo, that surface. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, worldsoccertalk.com.
Face in the crowd, you're talking too loud, but I can't hear you calling.
Bradley comes to get it. Sardis making the big run. Instead, it's for Juan Agudelo, able to bring it down. He's got the run from Ibarro. Agudelo cutting inside. Juan Agudelo!
Back on Soccer Morning, there's a goal call from John Strong. John Strong on the Fox broadcast last night. Juan Agudelo with the second as the United States beats Mexico 2-0. 2-0. And to talk about it, Seth Vertelny from goal. Setherton Vertelny on the hotline from goal. How are you, Seth?
I'm great, Jason. How about you?
I'm all over the place this morning. I'm riding a little high from this win last night. The United States needed this. Klinsmann needed this. Some of the players involved probably needed a confidence boost. And yet, here I am, the day after, and I said this last night, so I'm not saying anything new here. I'm not sure there's a whole lot to take away from this game, just based on the field conditions, the fact that both of these rosters were limited. Mexico was certainly more limited than the United States, so you would expect the U.S. to win this game. What did you actually take out of it? What kind of actual conclusions can we draw?
Not many. I think that, like most friendlies, what you take out of it is some of the individual performances. A couple of guys that helped themselves out last night, I thought, were Ventura Alvarado. First of all, the first couple appearances that he made with the U.S. national team were a little shaky, but it was good to see him get the start and perform well. Another guy, obviously, that sticks out is Jordan Morris. Another guy like Alvarado, who we had seen in spurts, but never for an extended run. Showed some flashes, obviously scored. And it was good to see Juan Agudelo get on the board. And, that's sort of the thing that you normally do with friendlies is you don't look at the result, but you look at some of the individual performances.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Especially for guys who are either new to the team, relatively new to the team, haven't been in the team in a long time, as you mentioned with Agudelo. I guess, it's a feel-good story that Jordan Morris, this college kid from Stanford, who we were all surprised to see originally called up for the first time and then again on this roster, scoring a goal, and then, allowing for the jokes. Hey, he had to get back on a plane because it's a school night. He had to, this isn't a joke. He couldn't win man of the match because it's sponsored by Budweiser and he's not old enough. Now, that might have happened with another couple of players in this team, but it did happen with Jordan Morris. Did you see enough from him to think that Klinsmann is vindicated on some level, or do we just sort of chalk this up to, hey, Klinsmann is being weird again and experimental, and let's not overthink Jordan Morris in this team?
Yeah, it is kind of the continuation of a theme that we saw develop at the World Cup, which was Klinsmann being vindicated for his faith in younger players. This summer we saw it with John Brooks and DeAndre Yadlin and Julian Green. Morris kind of looked like who he is, which is a very good prospect, a little bit raw, but with
a little bit,
a lot bit raw. Okay.
All right.
But with flashes of potential. And the fact that, someone who's main competition right now is other Division I players, the fact that he's able to go out in an international game and even look somewhat up to speed is encouraging. And, it just makes you say more and more, a Stanford education is great, and I'm glad that he values it. But at some point, you got to get this guy to a higher level of competition.
And I may be overthinking this, and certainly I don't know what's inside Klinsmann's head. Nobody does. I mean, that place is a maze. You go in there, you're never coming out. But I think that to me, it seems like maybe Klinsmann is kind of, look, he certainly rates Jordan Morris as a future contributor to the national team, as a future professional, and this may be sort of a nudge in that direction. I don't know I don't know what Jordan Morris's thought process is, but I can completely understand staying at Stanford and getting some of that education and building a life that you can leave soccer and everything will be good for you. So I don't know if there's anything to that, or if this is simply another shot across various American soccer organizations' bows, because that's what Klinsmann likes to do as well. Is there something to that? Is there something to this that, hey, Klinsman's sending Morris a message saying, I'm calling you up, even though you're in college, because I think you need to be a professional, because then you can come and really give us your all and be a part of this team.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, another guy that we've seen this with is Miguel Ibarra. Klinsmann has these guys that he spotlights and he calls them in now, it seems like, no matter what. And you have to wonder what sort of advice Klinsmann is giving Morris behind the scenes. Is he pushing him to sign with the European team? Has he been pushing him to turn down these Sounders offers? We're not sure how much Seattle has been offering him. With Klinsmann's preference for his players to go test themselves abroad, you wonder if he's been doing any work behind the scenes to try to pull some strings in Europe. You never know, but he has these guys and he wants to show them that he has faith in them and in their ability, even though they aren't playing at as high of a level as most of their teammates with the national team. And just curious to see what happens with Morris over the course of the next year now.
Have you heard anything about the process of the Sounders attempting to sign Morris? I know there's an offer on the table, or there have been offers on the table. Has it been reported that any of it's about money, or is it simply about him wanting to stay in school? Because, there's an argument to be made that this event, him scoring for the national team against Mexico, is only going to make him more expensive for his hometown team.
I think there are a lot of factors, but my understanding is the biggest factor is simply that Morris likes being at Stanford. He enjoys playing college soccer. He enjoys being in college. And also, he's not dumb. He realizes the value of a Stanford education and what that is going to mean for him after his soccer playing career is over. So I think that the Sounders have done pretty much whatever they've been able to do to try to get him in, and it just hasn't happened yet.
So we have Jordan Morris, again, the first college player in 24 years-ish to score for the United States of America. That was not something I ever expected I'd be saying, Seth, because he is in college. And again, moving forward, excuse me, exactly where do you think his place is? I mean, he's age eligible for the U23 team and the Olympic squad when that comes around. He's obviously gotten a taste of senior team soccer. He's not yet a professional. Are we just going to have this uncomfortable situation where he's a college kid who is still featuring heavily in these teams that are now in a modern age supposed to be about professional players?
Yeah, I think that right now he's not looking like he's going to leave school anytime soon. He's probably going to have another season there. And Klinsmann obviously has faith in him and will continue to call him into the national team. I think that with the U23 team, there's another opportunity for him to get some more minutes at a level higher than college and hopefully help the U.S. qualify for the World Cup. And that's coming up sometime soon. And yeah, I know it's strange, but you feel like he's going to be kind of in this purgatory state for a while where he's better than a college player, but not quite a pro player, but also kind of a national team player. It's going to be a strange period as long as he's still at Stanford.
He's a throwback, Seth. He's an American soccer throwback. Is it 1989? What year is it? That kind of thing. Yeah. Let's turn to Juan Agudelo. I'm going to focus on the goal scorers, and then maybe we'll look at the overall team performance, because as we already outlined, it's difficult to glean anything from that overall team performance for a number of reasons, not just the surface. Juan Agudelo comes back into this team. He obviously had that year wandering in the desert, not being able to find a place to play. He re-signs with the New England Revolution. It's been going pretty well. I mean, he's shown flashes of what he can do. He's clearly rusty. Did that goal get him back into this picture? I mean, forward depth has not been a thing that we've really thought the United States had recently.
Yeah, I think it was big for his confidence to get back into the national team, first of all, because it had been a while since he was with the U.S. And then also to come on as a sub and score right away, that's a big boost. What I think will get him more in the national team picture is actually putting together a run of goals with the Revolution. The thing with Agudelo, and this has been true almost his entire professional career, is he's never really scored a lot of goals. He's put together little stretches here and there, but he's never had a big goal scoring season in MLS or in Europe. So I think it's a big year for him with the Revs. He's kind of taken that starting spot from Charlie Davies. Looks like he's going to get a chance to go out and play a lot of minutes week in, week out. And if he can actually put together a run of goals, then I think that's really going to boost his stock with the national team even more than scoring last night did.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a very talented player, and I think I saw this. I don't have the tweet up in front of me, but it's something like giving just some perspective on where Juan Agudelo is. He is 22 years old. Is that right? So he's 2 years older than Jordan Morris, who we're all excited about. But he's still 3 years younger than Josie, and I think he's a year younger than Giassi Zardes. So it just goes to show you how early Juan Agudelo arrived, how quickly he disappeared, and now he's coming back with plenty of time to still be a major part of this team.
Right, exactly. It's like the Freddie Adu factor. You can't believe how young he still is, and I guess that's a product of scoring your first national team goal when you're 17 years old.
Absolutely, I remember those days. So the United States, again, it's a confidence-boosting win, Seth. It's something they needed, a game where they played well enough to win, and nobody could really say, well, they got lucky here or there. They needed a game where they didn't give up a late goal, which had been the trend. They needed a game to hang their hat on, and I don't know that this means anything or really informs the Gold Cup, but it has to take some of the heat off of Klinsmann. And I've been vociferous in sort of giving my perspective on Klinsmann's lack of direction, but I don't know that this really gives us any sense that he has any more than he did before.
No, I mean it's a friendly, and it's against a pretty weakened Mexico side. I think you would consider that maybe like a C+, B- team. But at the same time, it was a good performance, and we've seen those less and less frequently over the last few months after the World Cup. So I think you have to at least.
Oh, I seem to have lost Seth there for a second. I apologize for that. Let me see if I can get him back just to wrap up a discussion on USA Mexico. Again, you look at the field conditions, which again we're so atrocious that I'm not even sure you can blame players for not being able to complete a basic pass. At some point in the United States, and this was the issue with this is why Michael Bradley's pass obviously worked for Juan Agudelo. At some point, you just imagine players went, let's not put the ball on the ground anymore because we don't know where it's going to go. You couldn't even, a couple of times the United States had an opportunity to break, and for whatever reason, the break didn't come together. And I just can't imagine that the surface wasn't part of that. Seth, do I have you back? I apologize for that.
I am.
All right, so we're sort of putting some perspective into this game. Again, it's a midweek friendly that didn't involve a FIFA date. It's we all know it's a cash grab, and I don't mean that necessarily in some anti-corporate, this sucks, why are they doing this kind of way, except for the fact that they did risk injury. And we did have one injury. Kyle Beckerman came off with what U.S. Soccer reported as a thigh contusion, looked to everybody on television like it was a non-contact injury, and he subsequently had the ice on his knee. Should we believe U.S. Soccer here?
No, I think that whenever there's an injury like that, the first report is not to be believed. The difference is usually they'll say something like, there's a sprained knee, we'll evaluate it later, and then 90% of the time it turns out to be a torn ACL. I hadn't seen one where they did a different part of the body entirely. But yeah, I mean, I can't remember watching a U.S. game where the field was worse than that. I mean, It was a disgrace, really, to have an international game on a surface like that. And I think that U.S. Soccer and the Mexican Federation and some need to have some kind of a meaningful discussion about how they can avoid having another situation like that again, because it's not conducive to good soccer, and it's dangerous, and we'll wait and see what happens with Beckerman, but it can happen when there are so many outdoor stadiums with good services. I understand they want to get these games in locations where they're going to sell out and where they're going to spread the game around the country to get as many people to see the U.S. and Mexico as possible. But they have to do something to avoid having another game on a surface like that.
You know, and I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying, hey, you know what, this is CONCACAF. And certainly Miguel Herrera sort of addressed this after the game too. He said the surface wasn't an excuse. They were playing on the same thing we were, and this is what you're going to see in CONCACAF. And I understand that, and I understand what Herrera's spin has to be. From a fan's perspective, when people are throwing out there, oh, this is CONCACAF, you're going to see worse surfaces, or it's just going to, it's going to be bad. Maybe you could argue that some preparation for World Cup qualifying, but on the other hand, it's a meaningless game. And again, you're putting players in jeopardy. It looked to me, and this is again another reason why I think analysis is very difficult, Seth. People were trying not to fall down. It's that sort of half stride running that people do when they're on an icy surface, or, I used to work in restaurants, and you go through the back after they mop the floor, and you're like, don't pull your groin, don't pull your groin, don't pull your groin. That's what it looked like to me. Yeah,
and how many passes did you see where the ball just smoothly rolled on the ground from the passer to the person he was passing to? It just there was always a little bobble, there was always a hop. Sometimes there was a big hop. It would just pop up in the air. And, Herrera says this happens in CONCACAF. This happens in CONCACAF when the U.S. plays at, like, Antigua and Barbuda. Right. This shouldn't happen in the U.S. when they have so many good grass surfaces available to play a friendly on.
And you can certainly argue that from CONCACAF's perspective, these are your two most high-profile teams, with all due respect to Costa Rica. If you're going to put them on a stage and put them on television and have these two countries, Mexico and the United States, with their attention on these teams, put it on a decent surface that can show the best of what you have to offer. If anybody in Zurich or anybody in Europe sort of flipped by that game, they must be going, what the hell is this? CONCACAF is a joke again.
Yeah. And it affects the gameplay, but more importantly, it's dangerous. Kyle Beckerman got hurt. It was a non-contact injury. And these are the things that are more important than just not having the most aesthetically pleasing game to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Seth Vertelny from goal.com. Seth, we were sort of outlining whether or not player rankings had any business being out there, but I get why they're done, and I know Goal has them. Goal had plenty of coverage on this game as well. I look forward to seeing what happens in the near future. If you were going to have one takeaway, if you're looking at this game, maybe you're writing a column on it, maybe you're doing a recap, and you really want to focus on something. Is it Jordan Morris? Is it something else?
Yeah, I think that Morris stands out because he scored a goal. But I think that before his injury, I thought that Kyle Beckerman was looking very solid again. We'll have to wait and see, but I think that is another main takeaway, and even maybe more important than Morris, because Beckerman is still right there in the mix as part of the top A squad starting 11. Mm-hmm. And now, we're only a couple months away from the Gold Cup this summer, a tournament that the U.S. really wants to win. And I think that is another big takeaway, is that Beckerman, barring any sort of injury, we'll have to wait and see on that, still looks like a very valuable asset to the U.S. starting 11, just like he was at this summer's World Cup. Another one was Omar Gonzalez. We hadn't seen him with the U.S. national team in a long time, and he had another really good performance, much like he did when he got a shot at the World Cup last summer. So those two, I think, really cemented their status as starters, or at least right up there in the mix for starting spots. And that might be even more important than Jordan Morris, who realistically probably isn't going to start or maybe even play with the U.S. in the Gold Cup.
Seth, appreciate the time. Seth Vertelny, it's S Vertelny on Twitter. Go follow him, see his work at Goal. Thanks for the time, Seth. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll shift over to Germany. We're going to talk to Russ Dunbar about Dortmund, about Bayern, about the situation with Jurgen Klopp, and obviously Bayern falling behind in the Champions League. Soccer Morning, WorldSoccerTalk.com. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk with Jason Davis.
Here we are back on Soccer Morning, joined now by Ross Dunbar, covers German football for many a website. He's got a piece on Bayern Munich's loss yesterday over at dw.de, and Jurgen Klopp's departure from Borussia Dortmund at Fox Soccer. Ross, how are you?
I'm very well. Jason, how are you?
I'm well as well. I appreciate your time today. It's a bit of an interesting couple of days in the German football world, especially for the two biggest clubs in the country. I'm going to start with Bayern Munich. They go to Portugal in a Champions League tie that everyone would fancy them in, and they lose 3-1. Now, of course, we have to address the roster issues, the squad issues with the injuries and the like. But are you as surprised by that result as I am?
Yeah, I'm definitely surprised because to be honest, I haven't seen Porto play this season, so the way that they approached the game was quite alien to what I expected. Obviously, there was a Spanish feel to the team, and with guys like Oliver Torres and Jackson Martinez up front. But at the same time, I have seen a lot of warning signs in the last 6 months, and I spoke on another show last night and said that when Bayern go into the Champions League, the reality is that they get a different level of competition to what they get in the Bundesliga. So you can have a team like Mainz or Augsburg or even Hoffenheim press them and harass them and chase them and have the same intentions. But when you play a team like Porto, who are an elite side, then they have got exceptional quality on the counter-attack. And like we saw against Wolfsburg, like we saw against Borussia Mönchengladbach, Bayern were caught out with a high press and certainly with a high defensive line.
In terms of, I mean, that's interesting that you bring that up. That the competition is certainly different in Europe than in Germany. But I mean, that's true for a lot of these sides. I mean, it's true that when Barcelona and Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid obviously range outside of Spain, they're taking on a different level of competition, or they're playing each other in the Champions League in this case. Why would that be of a specific issue for Bayern Munich and Pep Guardiola?
Because I think they can play against a team like Frankfurt on Saturday, for example, and there were warning signs of their vulnerability in the high press. If the opposition plays with two strikers and they really press the central defenders, then you begin to see that there are actually some faults in this Bayern team, but if they win 4-1 and if they score goals like Lewandowski did, then people don't really want to complain about it. And to be fair, they don't have to complain about it, but you still would imagine that Pep Guardiola would adapt to the situation. It's very interesting because actually in the last few weeks they've gone away from the sort of style that they played last night, and they were playing like they did against Dortmund and Leverkusen. They played a 3-5-2, and it was much deeper, much more conservative. They were very methodical in the way they approached these games. So it's actually very strange that the Guardiola has decided to go back to this system for a game of that magnitude.
Some of this came down to individual mistakes, and certainly Dante stands out. Is that down to concentration? I mean, these things happen sometimes, Ross. I mean, this is a game. This is a sport that requires intense concentration. Even the best players in the world miss sitters. They make bad passes. They have howlers. In this case, is that something to be concerned about moving forward?
I think you could approach it from different standpoints. I mean, I definitely would agree with you that individual mistakes just happen in football. I mean, the Jerome Boateng mistake for the third goal, for example, was completely out of character, given how well he's played this year. For me, he's probably the best centre-back in Europe at the moment, and to make a mistake like that, which seems really basic, that was definitely just a case of, I think, an individual error. But with the cases of Xabi Alonso, for example, who lost the ball for the first goal, I mean, to me, that's something that has been standing out for a few weeks, and certainly in the German media. I think Xabi Alonso has had a lot of criticism, not from the fact that he's not good enough. I think he's maybe just at the stage of his career where maybe his legs aren't going quickly enough to move the ball and not be caught out in a high press. And Dante, for example, we've kind of addressed that situation so many times in the past. I mean, in the game against Hanover, he was subbed off in the first half. So there certainly has been warning signs, but I do agree with you that you can take into consideration that these were individual mistakes, and perhaps putting the blame onto Guardiola could be unfair, but I think maybe it could be justified as well.
Well, I mean, as we sort of outlined, going to Portugal with this skeleton crew, with no Ribéry and no Robin and no Alaba and no Schweinsteiger, and not that that's not that every one of those players is crucial to them winning away in Europe, but there's got to be enough sort of just. It's got to be just an adaptation situation. Like, oh, this is who we are, and then all of those players are missing, and maybe we're changing just not how we play necessarily, but certainly there's going to be some sort of there just can't be as much confidence. Essentially, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you mentioned some names there. I mean, David Alaba. I mean, there's probably not a player in European football, maybe apart from Paul Pogba, who's like him. I mean, it's impossible to replace a player like Alaba. Someone like Arjen Robben is impossible to replace. Mehdi Benatia, for me, I think he's really important to playing such a high line. So when you take those three players out of the equation, you almost have to adapt your playing strategy. You can't play a high formation, a high defensive line when you have a player like Dante who is quite slow in the transition back to defence. So that's definitely the one thing I would lay at Guardiola's door would be not adapting to that game. And like I say, it's interesting because in the last few weeks when they went to Dortmund, for example, and they went to Leverkusen, a team who play a very similar high-pressing, aggressive formation to Porto, they played a 3-5-2, and it was very deep. And like I say, they were looking to kill the game quite shrewdly rather than, trying to play like they did against Porto, which was, in my opinion, quite naive.
That does not sound like something that you would expect out of Pep Guardiola, although he does say, of course he's going to say this in the aftermath. Ross, he says that they can go back home and overturn this deficit, and they're certainly capable of doing that. But what will it take to do so, and how would you imagine things will shift from Porto's perspective? I mean, even if we're not quite, even if you haven't seen them play, obviously in Europe on the road at Bayern Munich is going to be a different mindset than you play with at home.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's an interesting one to talk about because I think Bayern could go gung ho right from the very start, and they could lose a goal within the first 2 minutes again, and that's basically the tie over. So you almost have to approach the game with a certain degree of caution, but at the same time being able to produce the attacking football that's going to get you goals. I mean, the worrying thing from Bayern's point of view, I think, is that they don't really have any major options that they could change. Pep Guardiola's only really got 12 or 13 players that he can work with. I think Bastian Schweinsteiger could be back for next week. Maybe that's the only player who would return in time. I don't really know what difference that would make. So it's going to be a big task for Bayern. I mean, I've seen Bayern fans on Twitter being quite realistic about the situation, that actually we're not really expected to maybe overturn this tie with such an injury crisis, and perhaps they're right. But it's interesting to see how that affects the overall picture of the season, because Bayern have placed a lot of importance on the Champions League, and Guardiola really wants to take Bayern into the next level.
Certainly, why he took that job, and why they would who doesn't want Pep Guardiola? But then with some of the shakeup of Bayern Munich, and certainly maybe his relationship with the press in the early going, I imagine things are not as simple as that. I'm going to turn to Dortmund now and talk about Jurgen Klopp. Has been announced he's leaving. He says he's leaving. Is this just the natural culmination of his time there? He has personified that club. Despite all of the great players that they've had, he's been that club for quite some time, and it's going to be very odd not to see Jurgen Klopp on the sidelines for Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, I think when a person like that embodies the club, embodies the region of Germany, and he embodies the style of football that Dortmund played when they won back-to-back championships, I think it's going to be quite strange to watch a Dortmund side that isn't coached by Jurgen Klopp. At the same time, there's an element of fascination to see how they actually go about replacing him, and how they manage this evolution that they need to certainly create in the summer, because this season has been a bit of a disaster from Dortmund's point of view. And yeah, I mean, it's a strange announcement in my opinion, because as early as last week, I saw guys like Watzke, the chief executive, saying that Klopp wouldn't be one of the people who would leave in the summer. So it must have been something very recent for him to make that decision. I mean, they lost quite comprehensively to Gladbach on Saturday. It was a really one-sided game, and maybe that was the turning point from Klopp's point of view. But it seems, I'm not saying it's a rash decision, but it seems as though it's definitely been thought about over maybe 1 or 2 days.
I mean, because he has been so important, and because he has been the steward of their success in this generation of Dortmund's existence, to see him leave, and as you said, if it was said that he was going to stay and now he's leaving, is there going to be a sense from the Dortmund faithful that he's abandoning them, or is this going to be, oh, thank you very much for your service, we understand you want to try something new?
No, I think the Dortmund fans would still have the same appreciation for him as they have done in the past. I think most people, including Dortmund fans, were probably quite realistic in that Jurgen Klopp was inevitably going to go to England at some point, whether it would be next year or the year after. I mean, he had a contract until 2018, so I don't think people would have expected him to bail out now. But given that he himself has admitted that he doesn't think he's number one choice for Dortmund at the moment, he doesn't think he's the ideal type of coach, then you almost just have to go along with that. You can't force him to stay on when he thinks within himself that he's not the right guy for the job. I'm then really interested to see the reaction, certainly on Saturday when they play Paderborn, and whether Klopp's departure has any impact on the rest of the season.
The question, again, for the outside world now is, where does he end up? He's going to be highly sought after. He's, as you said, he's been mentioned as a potential a candidate for England, for jobs in England. Obviously, Manchester City jumps top of the list only because of their resources and the fact that they haven't been able to get over that hump in the Champions League, and they seem to have taken a step back under Pellegrini this season. Is that your front runner, or certainly the bookies' front runner?
I would say it's definitely possible. I mean, I just in my eyes, I see someone like Liverpool as being an ideal option for Klopp, because Germans of that generation have a massive respect for clubs with tradition, and you see the way that Liverpool are thought of in the German media. They're very highly admired, and so that, to me, that would seem like the obvious option, perhaps. But at the same time, if Manchester City were to approach him, I think I think it would be interesting to see whether he would take it on. They certainly have the money. There's been talk that maybe Pep Guardiola would be the next Manchester City manager. So there's quite an interesting battle there between Klopp and Guardiola for maybe the next Man City job. So, but I definitely think it's inevitable that his next post will be in England.
Well, I've heard him connected to obviously City, but certainly Liverpool and Arsenal as well. Which, again, I think all of these things are possible. How likely they are, I'm not sure. I guess for me, what the question would be is what does Klopp value? Because I put this out I put some tweets out about Manchester City tripping over themselves to get Klopp's agent on the phone, but people say, it's not about money for him, and it may not be. He may just want the challenge. He may want to go into the right situation. He may want to be given complete control of a club and the opportunity to build it the way that he did Dortmund over the last couple of seasons. Is that where you think his mind is?
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I could imagine, the sort of challenge I'd imagine Klopp taking on. A team that maybe hasn't achieved a lot over the last maybe 10 years and maybe needs some fresh impetus, and that's why I suggested Liverpool. I mean, obviously it depends on what happens with Brendan Rodgers, but at the moment it doesn't seem as though he's doing a particularly good job there. I mean, I think when I look at Manchester City, I kind of ask myself whether I could imagine Jurgen Klopp's style of football matching that squad that he has at Man City, and I'm not entirely sure it fits. I couldn't imagine players like Samir Nasri, for example, playing a really high pressing, enthusiastic style of football. But like you say, I mean, all of these things are possible. I don't think there's any definitive answer right now, and Klopp said that he didn't have any plans, so I'm sure that if Manchester City wanted them, they probably could get them.
Is there going to be an exodus from Dortmund? Do you think that Klopp is going to be able to attract some of his players, or those players at Dortmund now, currently obviously Marco Reus is top of the list, may end up moving on because Klopp's moving on?
I get the feeling that Klopp probably wouldn't want to go back to Dortmund and pick some of the players from there. Although from what you read in the German media this morning, Klopp's departure potentially could keep Mats Hummels at Signal Iduna Park. That's potentially a benefit of that. Ilkay Gundogan, it looks as if his future lies elsewhere. Marco Reus is a bit more complex given that he signed a new contract. He's a Dortmund boy and maybe he wants to stay there, but at the same time, when Barcelona or Real Madrid come calling, eventually then you would imagine that he would probably leave as well. The problem is when you mention those three players, I don't think those three players are the issue. Dortmund really have to reconstruct their squad. They have to get rid of Immobile, Mkhitaryan, and players like that. So, while we talk about losing big name players, they still have to offload players who maybe just aren't performing in that squad.
Who does Dortmund turn to replace Klopp?
I think it seems likely that Thomas Tuchel would be the number one candidate. It's interesting because a club of that size, you would think that they would consider international options, but I kind of get the impression that they will go for a German speaker, someone who's kind of based in Germany. The other option I heard was Paulo Sousa from FC Basel. He's a German speaker, obviously played for Dortmund when they won the European Cup. He's done a good job in Switzerland. That could potentially be an option. But apart from Tuchel, I don't really know of any other names that would be available. I mean, Lucien Favre and Marcus Weinzierl of Gladbach and Augsburg, respectively, have been put forward. But these guys are on long-term contracts, and I don't think Dortmund would want to pay a large sum when they really have to invest it in the squad. And Tuchel just makes sense. He's a really highly rated coach. He's young, fresh ideas. He's German, knows the league. It makes complete sense, I think.
Certainly, that element of it is going to come into play here, and I guess Dortmund. I help me kind of place Dortmund in the European hierarchy, because when a job opens up like when a Real Madrid is looking for a new manager, clearly Manchester City is new money, but they rate on that level. When when the biggest clubs in Europe are looking for a new manager, there's a usual suspect list. There's certainly big names. These are accomplished coaches with European pedigrees and cup titles to their name. Is Dortmund not on that level, or is that simply because they choose not to be?
That's a good question. I don't think. I think financially they could attract a big name coach if they wanted to. I would imagine that Jurgen Klopp was on a pretty handsome salary given that his contract was until 2018. The thing is that I think the expectations of what Dortmund can do outside of Germany are a bit different to maybe what happens in the Ruhrgebiet. I mean, I think if Dortmund were to finish second or third or well, let's say fourth is probably pushing it a little bit. If they finish second or third and do well in the cup and maybe do well in the Champions League, that would be a successful season. They're not expected to compete with Bayern year in year out. So it is interesting, but I mean, I think given that Klopp is leaving, they really need a root and branch reconstruction of this squad. So to bring someone in from the outside who doesn't understand German football, doesn't understand the environment, that would be a bit of a risk, I would think. And Watzke, the chief executive, has already said that they would look for security rather than speed when they make the appointment. So, so I think Tuchel to me strikes as being the obvious appointment. I can't think of any others in the German sort of market who would take the job. I don't know if any of the top coaches would want to leave their positions. And like I say, I mean, I just can't imagine Dortmund paying a massive buyout fee either.
What kind of shadow does Klopp cast on his successor, and certainly, in a different sort of sense? What is his legacy at Dortmund going to be when everybody starts to write the postmortems on the Jurgen Klopp era?
I think certainly Dortmund, like I think I've just said that their expectations maybe aren't as high as what they are internationally, but I think they definitely have changed. I mean, when Klopp took over in 2008. Dortmund were obviously off the back of a financial implosion. They were kind of yo-yoing about mid-table, and the way that they approached the first couple of seasons with Mario Götze coming through and Kevin Grosskreutz and Nuri Sahin, it was fantastic and really refreshing. I think, unfortunately, the last two seasons may have soured the legacy that Klopp will leave. I don't think the same pressure will be on the next appointment. I think if someone like Tuchel, for example, came in, I think he would have a relatively free rein at trying to change the squad around, playing a different style of football, and to be honest, regardless of who they bring in, the season probably couldn't have got much worse. I mean, Dortmund are still in a relegation battle, which is quite astounding to think with 6 games to go. So I'm not sure that the legacy that Klopp will leave will have any bearing on the success that comes in.
Russ Dunbar covers German football for DW Sports and has a piece up at Fox Soccer this morning as well that you should certainly read. You can follow him on Twitter at Russ Dunbar 93. Ross, thank you very much for your time and your insight. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll open up the phone lines. You want to talk about Jurgen Klopp, Bayern Munich, Champions League, USA, Mexico, whatever is on your mind on a Thursday, hit us up. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on World Soccer Talk with Jason Davis.
Phone lines are now open, 646-832-3909. Anybody want to crow Dos Aceros type stuff or not? Or do you have a perspective on this? I'm getting people on Twitter don't like the fact that I'm being cynical about this. I'm not being cynical about a 2-0 win for a B team over a C team. I don't think I'm being cynical. I'm being realistic. I'm having a perspective on this. Look, is it good that the United States beat Mexico last night? Absolutely. Is it good that it was 2-0? Absolutely. It only adds to the mythology of Dos Aceros, although, come on, a friendly with those teams doesn't add much. A little bit, a sprinkle, a saison. And that's what I love about that, about Dos Aceros, is it's taken on such proportions now that when the United States goes up 2-0 through Juan Agudelo, people are actively rooting, U.S. men's national team fans are actively rooting for the United States not to score another goal because it feeds Dos Aceros. Because we can chant it with the scoreline meaning something. I know here's somebody who wants to crow about Dos Aceros, Washington and New York. What's going on?
How's it going, man? How's it going? Dos Aceros, baby. And I don't care about B, C, D, Z, anything like that. If it were the other way around, Mexico would not be pointing out letters. They'd be saying Dos Aceros too. So Dos Aceros, baby.
Okay. All right. Eddie in Brooklyn is on Twitter. He says, like I said last night, new rule, you can't say Dos Aceros if you bitch about the SAP button not working on Fridays. That's a shot. It's a shot at people's language skills. Look, I mean, it is what it is what it is. There's a certain amount of cultural appropriation on the part of the U.S. men's national team fan base, which, let's be honest, includes a lot of Spanish speakers or people of Hispanic extraction who have Spanish in their homes. So it's not like they're just borrowing. But yeah, look, when you got a bunch of white people yelling Dos Aceros, Washington, maybe that's not the best. But at this point, Dos Aceros is like RSVP. RSVP is in French, but people use it all the time. Dos Aceros, it's okay with me. That's right. I see what you're saying. I can dig that. You got anything else, or you just you want?
Yeah, I do actually. I do. So I'm curious about one thing. When I saw Juan Agudelo, first of all, I loved turf aside, because we all know turf is crappy. So let's stay away from that for now. But I did like his score. I love the fact that he kind of turned the corner yesterday. He's back in the U.S. soccer's limelight. But my question is, I do notice this. I notice this about him, and I notice this about Freddie Adu, that they go into what I call the U.S. soccer's Bermuda Triangle for a while. Like they disappear. They do really well, and you say, wow, this is the next great hope. And then they end up, in Bermuda somewhere, in Bermuda Triangle, meaning they disappear. What do you think happens? I mean, do they fall out of favor somehow? Do they make a comment? Because I noticed that this happened when Freddie Adu left MLS. That's when he kind of disappeared. And then with Juan Agudelo's, when he made certain comments, that's when he disappeared. Like, are we really that petty?
I think that I think in the Agudelo's case, it was a matter of circumstance. He wanted to move abroad. He wanted to take his shot in Europe, especially after having been traded from the Red Bulls to Chivas USA and then to New England. And I don't really blame him necessarily. He just came up against the fact that he tried to sign in a country where he couldn't get a work permit because he wasn't yet established as an international player. And then, that wandering stuff around the continent, why he never actually made a deal and signed with anybody, I don't know. I'm glad to see him back. I am too. I think that it's an individual circumstance with him because I don't want to put him on Freddie Adu. And second of all, Washington, Freddie Adu is a player who I don't think really impressed anybody that much while in MLS. You remember, DC United tried, didn't quite work out. They traded him to RSL. That's how Nicky Romano.
He was like 14, 15. I mean, he's one of the youngest.
No, I don't blame him.
There's immaturity there. There's something to be said about that. You know that when you sign someone.
I don't blame him necessarily for what happened to him in terms of his career progression. I mean, he chose to sign. Let's be honest about that. Or his mom helped him sign that deal. He could have gone to Inter Milan as a youth player. But I think that he's got a very different situation, and he became a wanderer in a much different way than Juan Agudelo did. And I have hope for Adele. I don't have much hope for Freddie Adu. I got to go. Thanks for the call, Washington.
Hey, take care, man. Bye-bye.
There you go. So a little Dos Acero plus talk of Juan Agudelo. Lawrence wants to talk USA Mexico. What's going on?
The greatest thing ever about friendlies is that when you win, you can be loud and obnoxious about it. You can hold it over whoever you beat, and you can be stupid. You can draw things from it that shouldn't probably be drawn from it. And when you lose, you can use the excuse, hey, it's just a friendly, so it doesn't matter. So there's a lot of that going on. We got a lot of USA fans being loud and stupid about drawing stuff that probably shouldn't be drawn from a friendly with two BC teams. And we got a lot of Mexico fans going, hey, it was a bunch of BC teams. It's just a friendly. Doesn't matter.
No, look,
that's what's awesome about friends.
I thanks for the call, Lawrence. I think, and I'm gonna tweet right here from Daniel. If the U.S. lost 2-0, you'd have a thing or two to say about Klinsmann and the state of the team. You're never positive. If the U.S. had lost 2-0 on that field with that team, I would have said, well, that wasn't great. Nobody had any fun, but it doesn't mean anything. I would have been consistent about it because I can't say ahead of the game, well, look at the conditions. Look at the makeup of the two rosters. Look at the fact that it's midweek, that it's mostly MLS players and Liga MX players. And then backtrack afterwards and say, hey, wow, what a great performance the United States put on. Klinsmann really got his tactics right, blah, blah, blah. I can't do that. And I think that while Klinsmann coached that game fine and good, it didn't, in the context of it, it just doesn't mean a whole lot. That's all I'm going to say. Let's go to Gary in Austin. What's up, Gary?
Hey man, it's so I was at the game last night and I know the field aside, it was terrible and whatever, but Kyle Beckerman I think makes Michael Bradley look that much better. And so I was just wanting to wonder what you were thinking. Who do you think the next Kyle Beckerman or that they should be looking at in the U.S. national team?
That's a good question. Beckerman's traits. He's not the fastest player. He's not the most physical player. Well, he can be physical. He's not the most athletic player. I think he reads the game very, very well, and he is accurate with his passing. He is smart with his passing. He knows when to take a chance and when to maybe play sideways. I mean, look, we get upset when players, especially like Mix Diskerud, and this is a matter of expectations of the individual players. If Mix Diskerud is playing sideways passes all game, we get upset about it. But if you've got Kyle Beckerman behind Michael Bradley, playing some sideways passes, helping the ball get wide, maybe helping it get funneled to Bradley, then you're okay with that. Maybe Will Trapp. Maybe that he's that guy.
That's what I was thinking too.
I think he's got the eye for the pass. I think he's got the understanding of the game that's coming along. There is something else about Beckerman that's the calm, though. And I don't know that there's another player right now where I would put on that kind of Kyle Beckerman, eye of the hurricane sort of calm.
Yeah, he brought in Perry Kitchen yesterday, and I just didn't feel like he gave the same vibe as Beckerman did. But I feel like Will Trapp might be able to do that. Yep. Maybe in the future or something.
You got anything else, Gary?
No, that's it, man. Thank you.
Appreciate the phone call, Gary in Austin, chiming in on USA Mexico. Next up is Carlos, USA Mexico as well. What's up, Los?
Hi, how you doing? I was just calling to kind of chime in on the whole Mexico-USA game. You know, as a U.S. fan, for me, I think it's important that we kind of take a step back. It's good that we won the game, yes, but I think this game is more misleading than anything else. I mean,
look, Carlos, that's only if you let it be misleading. I'm not misled. I'm gonna wait. Look, again, I've said all along. You're going to judge Jurgen Klinsmann by the Gold Cup performance. Now, I can be worried about the path he's taking. I can be worried about the preparations. I can be worried about whether or not he's getting this team ready to play in the Gold Cup. But I don't know if it's going to be wrong until we get there and we see how they perform in that tournament. So I'm not going to be misled, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the whole Morris storyline, I was surprised that he was even starting for the game. You know, he scored, great story, but I don't think we should jump ahead of the gun and say, oh, this is a future starter. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And let's be realistic. We were playing a seaside when it came to Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. 100%.
Not trying to take anything away from the U.S. because I'm behind the U.S. 100%. But when it came down to it, for me, the game was just more frustrating than anything else. I mean, Yedlin, the guy just does not convince me as far as his defensive duties go.
Man, look, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, look, I want to like the guy, but every time I see him, he makes me nervous, and he's not a good right back, at least not right now.
Let's get some time to develop. Appreciate the call, Carlos. We could go into individual player performances and really talk about like our perceptions of how they played. And here's the thing about that game. And another reason why I think analysis is difficult is the surface and the conditions and the team. They made everything so wildly subjective. I saw people on Twitter hating on Michael Bradley's performance, and I saw people on Twitter holding up Michael Bradley as wonderful in this position, and this is where he should be, and look how good he's playing. I know he had 59% passing percentage in the first half, which is terrible for Michael Bradley. Goes to show you just how bad that field was. Did he play well? I thought he played okay, but again, I don't know for sure. And the fact that people who know the game are way far apart on how well different players played is indicative of just how weird that game was. Preston, what's up?
Hey, Jason. Just calling in from Utah. Just wanted to talk a little bit about players that did pretty well, even though I agree that the friendly doesn't really mean anything. It was fun to watch, and it was good to see a couple players do well. I think Mick Stitzgerud had a good game playing on the outside of that diamond, which was a little weird to see him out there.
Yeah, well, if you're gonna play the diamond, there's no other place for him because Michael Bradley's a 10.
Yeah. Beckman's the 6, and where do you put Mick? So I thought that was a good place for him. I think that we could see him there in the future, maybe with Alejandro Bedoya on the other side. And I was really encouraged by Ventura Alvarado.
Yeah, absolutely.
He played really well. I'd love to see him in the future, maybe with John Brooks as his center pairing, or Michael Orozco. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, it was pointed out, Preston, that last night. It was pointed out on the broadcast, a couple of places on Twitter, that the game really set up very nicely for both Alvarado and Omar Gonzalez. You could not play the ball on the ground through the middle. You just couldn't do it.
That's true.
And so lots of lofted balls, lots of crosses, lots of opportunities for Gonzalez to do what he is best at, and that's winning balls in the air. So when you say that, I thought Alvarado was fine too. Again, difficult to assess their performance because of the conditions. I thought he was fine. I thought Gonzalez was pretty good. But how much does that translate? I have no idea.
Yeah, and we'll find out if he's put into the Gold Cup team or not. But also, you wanted to just talk really quickly on RSL.
Okay, go fast.
Really quick. I understand that it hasn't been the prettiest season. Haven't scored a whole bunch in a run of play. They've had some 0-0 draws, but they're still unbeaten.
Yeah.
Still making it work, even with the absences of players. Anyway, just wanted to shout out to my RSL boys, and they're doing well.
And I think it's important to note that if you're going to do a transition, the way that Kassar is doing a transition at RSL, and they're going to change some things about the way that they play, they're going to sort of break down from the Jason Kreis era and move into something new, which I have no problem with. He's the coach. That's his decision. Then the best you can ask for is sort of treading water until you get going. And you have to have faith, of course, that they're going to get going. But treading water now is fine. Holding teams goalless is good because that means you don't have to really rely on attacking clicking in a new system.
Yeah, once Joel Plata comes back, I think
that's
there will
going to
be
be
a
magic.
lot more dynamic attack.
Yeah, appreciate the phone call, Preston. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jason.
All right, there goes Preston. Let's turn now to John in Portland, who wants to talk about Diassi Zardes. What's up, John?
Hey, Jason. First time, long time. I was talking with a buddy of mine, and we were talking about Diassi Zardes' hold-up play and how good it looked, obviously, pitch aside and everything like that, and how he compares to Josie in that regard. And I know Josie's not a world beater in terms of hold-up play. He's good. But, at this point in Zardes' career, especially last night in the game, looking back at the last couple games, his ability to stay upright.
Yeah.
Hold the ball, wait for guys to come on and lay it off. I mean, it looks really good.
Yeah, I was encouraged.
Is this something we can look forward to for the next decade? Is he going to ever surpass Josie in that regard? It seemed to relieve pressure from the back really well in the second half.
Yeah, the thing about both of them is that I don't think that's their natural game. I think they're both better facing the goal than they are with their back to the goal, or they would prefer. They're more comfortable. Let's say it that way. They're more comfortable facing goal than with their back to goal. I think it's always evident with Josie. I think he never really looks comfortable trying to do hold up play. He can get it done, but he's got a big first touch too often. Zardes had a couple of moments last night where I sort of noticed how good his touch was on a terrible surface. Right. And I was like, wow, that's pretty good, but he's inconsistent with it. And I don't know that he's getting enough reps in that spot doing that thing that I'm really going to be trusting him to be that guy for the national team down the road. You know what I mean? I think it's possible. I think he's got the skill set.
I mean, right now, playing for LA, he's combining with Keane. But what, another year or two, Keane's gone? Can he become the focal point of that and build that in LA? He's 22 years old, something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, think about him 4 years down the road at 26,
23
in Russia.
Yeah.
Maybe he builds that skill and he bulks up a little and he's just the man up front. I don't know. It seems enticing.
It absolutely does. I appreciate the call, John. Thanks a lot. There goes John in Portland. Let's turn now to Richard in New Jersey. What's up, Richard?
Hey, Jason, how you doing?
Good.
First of all, I just want to say I spoke to Trevor. That was actually pretty cool. So I got a little excited about that.
Trevor's a celebrity now.
I just want to speak about Freddie Adu. You were saying, like, I just want him to. He's not great player on the European field anymore. Like, I'm not even Freddie Adu hater. Like, I was a Philadelphia Union fan when he signed with the Union. I was super excited, but now he just runs around Europe like, I'm trying to get to Europe. I'm trying to get to Europe. And it was like he's running around these places like Slovakia. He's in Finland now. He played in Finland, I think, last night. He didn't even get on the field. Like, I just want him to get out there. Like, Juan Guardiola was sort of that way, but he just said, I don't want to say he took his medicine. He's like, okay, I'm not going to make it to Europe. MLS might be the way to go. And I just want Freddie to, like, do the same thing. Like, supposedly one of the talk was he had Raul type money waiting for him at the Cosmos. He's like, no, I'm going to rather go to Europe. Just go back to MLS, go back to America. Just that's who you are. You're not a European style player. You know what I'm saying?
I think there might be a couple of things at work here, and this is all guess. This is all guessing on my part. I'm not trying to play dime store psychologist on Freddie Adu, but you got to imagine that's got to be tough for him coming back to the States. That he is outside of maybe Landon Donovan, outside of Alexi when he had the beard and the hair, and he doesn't do that anymore. Freddie Adu is the most recognizable American soccer player we've got. That people who don't know soccer know Freddie Adu because of the hype machine, because of the Sierra Mist commercials, because he was called the next Pele, and everybody knows who Pele is. So I imagine him coming back to the U.S., and especially playing for a club that Pele played for. I mean, how much pressure, and just how annoying would it be to sort of have people yelling at you all the time, hey, Freddie, what's going on? Like, I don't think that that's probably a good experience for him. I don't know that he's hiding out in Finland, but if you're going to go hide out, isn't Finland the right place to go? I mean, he got a little bit of pub for signing with that team. They had some weird press conference deal, but I don't know that he's going to be under the spotlight that he would here. And I know that's odd to say about America and soccer, but it's probably only true for Freddie Adu.
I mean, yeah, and I hear what you're saying. Like, I just wanted to say, like, dude, the hype machine is dead for you. Just play the game, play in MLS, do good in MLS, and then maybe someone will come call.
Yeah, but I don't think right now I don't think that Freddie Adu can ever be a normal player, right, Richard? Thanks for the call, man. I got to move on. I don't think he can ever be a regular player. I don't think he can ever be a regular guy, at least not while he's still in his playing years. And the kid's 25 years old. It's not done for him athletically yet, unless he's just not good enough, and he's clearly not ready to hang him up. And what would he do? Where would he transition? David, you're on the air. What's up?
Yeah, 25 or 35. Did anybody see him actually play in Brazil? He got like maybe about a total of 30 minutes. I saw all of them, and let me tell you, the guy looked out of shape, overweight, and he just looked horrible. He's lucky he's getting a job anywhere. Anyway, Dos Acero. So, I was just going to say, and you've already stated it, Mexico C team versus US B team, that should be what we expect. I think Dos Acero, in sort of an odd, sort of counterintuitive way, is actually a compliment to the Mexican national team. Because when they go down 1-0, unlike some other teams like off in the U.S., they don't go into this shell and try to keep the score down or panic for 15 minutes. They have a tendency to turn right around and try to get right back into the game, and they leave themselves vulnerable at the back. And I think that's a big reason why there's been a bunch of those upsetos. But Jason, I'm just going to say, Jordan Morris, he scored a nice goal, had a nice touch on that goal, but I was not impressed. I thought he was completely overmatched out there. Yes, he's got great speed, but I wasn't impressed. I don't think he belongs on this team. I know that's not the narrative going on right now. Go ahead.
Well, don't build a straw man, David. I'm not sure that there's a lot of people calling for Jordan Morris to be some sort of Gold Cup hero or something. I think that he's clearly got some developing to do. I got a bunch of calls. I got to go. And he's got some developing to do, and he's extremely raw. And again, I will still question Klinsmann calling him up, whether he scored a goal or not. I mean, that doesn't justify Klinsmann necessarily. He tried really, really hard last night. He's showed some raw ability. I don't know. I mean, you can't. And I'm going to throw this out there. Hard to judge him on that surface. Nelly, what's up? Or whoever this is. Who's this?
Hey, this is Nelly from Dallas.
What's going on?
Hey, Jason. Hey, after last night's game, so I like to read the Spanish media.
Yeah.
Their tweets and their reports. Sometimes I just like to see what excuses they're going to come up with. And something that I found interesting was they were talking about how Miguel Herrera was going to try and convince Ventura Alvarado and William Yarborough to bring him over to Copa America, to entice them and bring him over because he saw what he liked from Alvarado especially. Do you think there's a chance that we may lose those two? I mean, Yarborough said he was going to play with the USA, but Alvarado, do you think we may lose any of them?
I have no idea what's in those guys' heads. I don't know how Mexican they feel, how American they feel. They probably feel equally both. And, the question of whether or not this is international soccer is a matter of heart or head is an open question. And it comes down to the individual players. Does Ventura Alvarado see his future as brighter with the U.S. national team than with the Mexican team? I have no idea. And this is a recruiting game, too. Jurgen Klinsmann saying stuff in his ear and in Yarborough's ear. And so is Miguel Herrera whenever he can get in touch with him. I don't know how these things work necessarily.
Now,
I think
if for any reason they do get called for Copa America, does that mean that Alvarado can't play for the USA anymore? I forget how
if he plays
that kind of term would.
If Alvarado plays for Mexico at the Copa America, he is locked in because that is a FIFA sanctioned tournament and it's competitive. So he's not locked in.
But he has to officially play, right? Like he has to officially be on the pitch, right?
Yeah, he has to take the field, right? It's not just being named to the team. He'd have to take the field, yeah. Thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it. I got to move on. A couple more calls before we get out of here. Let's go to Cole in Indiana. What's up?
Hey, Jason. I just wanted to get your opinion on the left back situation right now and see who you think is going to be a starter for the Gold Cup. If it could be Garza, Shea, or if you think Fabian Johnson will take that up.
Can we just stop for a second and enjoy the fact we have options at left back? Are you kidding me? Wow.
Absolutely.
When did this happen? I looked down. We had DeMarcus Beasley making a comeback. I love DMB. And that was great that he was able to fill that role. But now all of a sudden we got Greg Garza coming along, and Breck Shea is rounding himself into a decent left back. I mean, defensively, still lots of questions there. Still open to interpretation whether he's ready to play at the international level, especially when you go into the later stages of the Gold Cup and it's Mexico and Costa Rica and Panama and those countries, Honduras. But I see enough there, and he's certainly dangerous going forward. So I think what we're talking about here is that it may be situation. It may be determined by the situation. It may be determined by the matchup. It may be determined by who's on the other side or how the balance of the formation is working out and whether Klinsmann wants to push forward with his left side and Shea on overlaps or if he has somebody on the left wing who can play with his feet on the chalk and maybe he needs somebody who can cut inside a little bit more or he wants a stay-at-home defender. And certainly Garza is a better stay-at-home defender than Shea. So I don't know that we should be picking between the two right now, Cole.
Right.
All right, appreciate
the
call.
All right, sounds good, Jason.
There you go. Let's go to the last call of the day. Jason in Vegas wants to talk about Jordan Morris. What's up, Jason?
Hey, I just wanted you had one caller just a few minutes ago was saying that he didn't he didn't think Morris should have been called up and thought he was just fast. Was he watching the same game I was? Because fine, it's the Mexico C team, but they're still wearing a Mexican national team jersey.
Yeah.
Which means they're not schlub players. And it looked to me like they could barely contain him. And this is a guy in his first appearance. I thought he was pretty good aside from the goal.
Well, I mean, it was interesting to see some of the commentary while he was out there and some of the reaction to the fact that, hey, look, first of all, he's a trier, which I will always respect. He goes out there and he busts his ass. And he clearly he's 20 years old. He's playing in front of 65,000. He looked like he wanted to vomit before the game. He was so nervous. And then he goes out there and he busts his ass. And that's all I can ask from a kid that young. And again, whether he has the skill level to be on this level, I don't know yet. But if you consider that he's fast and you cannot teach speed, and yeah, maybe we rely on speed too much in the U.S., I'm not going to hate on the guy because he can run fast. I'm not going to hate on the guy because he put pressure on the defense because he can run fast. And even if that's all we saw, then what you're saying still applies.
Yeah, I just remember a guy, who didn't exactly have the kind of speed Morris had, but back in the day, Josh Wolf was an aggressive, put pressure on him, kind of guy up top, and Morris kind of looked a little bit like that to me.
Well, what I see a little bit more.
I don't think this is a big enough sample size to say, oh, hey, here's our next star forward. But
no.
I mean, he had some nice touches. He like I said, he certainly busted his ass, and I thought the touch on the goal was a pretty nice touch to get the ball out to his feet.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, lots of players in that situation, especially as young and inexperienced as he is, would botch that touch, or they'd cut too wide, or they'd flat out just miss the shot. They'd put it across, they go back post and miss. And that happens all the time. So I don't think we should underrate his ability to finish that goal. But again, as you said, sample size and the like, it makes it difficult. Appreciate the phone call, Jason. I'm wrapping this one up.
I got one more thing real quick.
Too late. Dropped him. My fault, Jason. I apologize. We do got to wrap this up. Before I go, I'm going to suggest that you go over and read Simon Evans' Twitter feeds, SG Evans on Twitter. A frequent guest of the show, columnist at World Soccer Talk. He is at the CONCACAF Congress. I'm not sure where that is right now, but it's happening. With Jeffrey Webb as the CONCACAF president, is addressing the collected representatives of all the countries of CONCACAF. Here's just a couple of tweets. Series of speeches and eulogies in support of bladder coming from the floor now. Honduras, Jamaica, Haiti, Turks and Caicos. This is turning from a CONCACAF Congress into a pro-bladder rally. Puerto Rico and Panama, latest to praise bladder and commit vote. This is all under approval of minutes from the last Congress, by the way. Dominican Republic representatives talk of historical roles of Moses, Christ, Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Mandela, and bladder. That's the guy. That guy. Go to 30fc.com to buy your Soccer Morning t-shirt. Go to backheel.com/store to buy your Soccer Morning mug. Thank you very much for all the calls today. You were all brilliant. I hear you're very polite on the phone when you call producer Trevor. That's great. You could give him a little bit more trouble if you want to in the future. That's okay with me. Let's get going. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Big Friday episode. See you then.